So now, if everything is okay, we can create the country and add it to the database. So obviously we will call the create country method from the repository, but remember this method actually returns a boolean depending on whether the save was successful or not. So we are going to capture that boolean, and if the save was not successful, we will create a custom error, and if it was successful, then everything is saved and we can move on. So let's do an if statement and check if the call to the country repository create method, we of course need to pass the object, which is the country to create. So if the saving of this country was successful, then we'll move on, but if not, then we can create the custom error message, and just like before, we can add it to the model state. So actually, you know what, I'm gonna copy this and paste it here, and in this case we can say something went wrong, saving, and the country name. And just like before, when we returned 422, which was unprocessable entity, now we will return status code of 500, which is a server error, because this is a little more generic, but we don't know what went wrong, but we will return the status code along with the model state, which will contain not only this error message, but any other errors that may have occurred. So here we will return status code of 500 along with the model state. And finally, if everything is okay, the country was created, and now what? Well, usually we return back to the resource that was just created. In other words, we would basically display the information of the new country. And to do that, we will return created at route. And basically we will route back to the get country method, which will display the newly created country. So we will do a return, and we will do the created at route. And here we need to specify the method, which is get country. That's where we want to go. However, this country expects an ID of the country. Over here you can see that it expects country ID as an integer, and we actually need to pass it as a country ID. The argument's name must match. So down here I will create a new anonymous object of the country ID. So we will do country ID will equal, and we will pass in the country to create ID, because at this point the country was created, it's in a database and has its own ID. And one thing we need to pass in is also the actual object that we just created. So that's the country to create. This one says created at route result. I just want it created at route. It just IntelliSense added it itself. So we are returning created at route, going to get country. We are creating new country ID that matches the ID of the newly created object, and we have the object as a parameter that goes to the created at route. So our action is almost finished. All we need is to add the response types, and we have here 400, which is bad request. Then we have a 422, and we have 500. So we'll add those along with the OK response type, which in this case is 201, meaning created. So 201 is of type country, of the object, and then we have the 400, 422, and 500 errors. Alright, let's build it and run it and see if everything is okay. So I'm in the Postman, and here's the list of the countries we have so far. So to create a country, we'll go to a post, and we need to add the country to the body. So we'll go to the body, and here I added a name property, and the country I want to add is Spain. And it's simply a JSON format. That's it. One property with the value for it. Now we don't need the ID, because obviously we are creating a new country, and the database will create the ID automatically. So let's create send and see what happens. And we got an error. So let's see what's going on. And it says no route matches supplied values. So it seems there's a problem not with creating the country, but with routing back to the getCountry method. And what is happening here, we did specify the name of the method, and the method exists, which is right here. But we need to actually explicitly enter it as a name for this method as well, or for this action. So here in HTTP GET, we have the route for the country ID, and we'll add another parameter after it, so a comma, and this time we want the name equals to. And this is the attribute name for this action, and we will specify that this action is called getCountry. Even though it is actually named that way, we want to make sure or specify the name explicitly. So now when we route to getCountry, this name matches the name property of the action. So let's build it and go back to the Postman, and let's try create Spain again. And now it says that it's unprocessable entity, that's the 422, and if you scroll down it says country Spain already exists. But how come? It already errored before, right? Well, if you go to get and get all the countries, Spain indeed already exists, because with the last call we did process the object and added it to the database. Again, the only thing that failed was the route, and that's already after we saved the country in the database. So let's try another country, and I'm going to add India and go to post and send, and this time we have 201 created, and you can see that we are redirected to this resource that we just created over here. And we have also offers, which is the navigational property in the country class, and that's because we are using the whole object instead of the DTOs. But this is just to create the objects or the entities, therefore we don't really care that there are null values for these navigational properties. So now if we go to get and get all the countries, we should have Spain and India, and here's India, and we have Spain. And again, if we go to post and try to enter India again, which is already existing country in the database, we should get the unprocessable entity 422 with the error message that the country India already exists, along with all the other stuff from the model state. Now this is for me for debugging. If you wanted to, you could actually just return the message alone for the user. Basically we would just come over here, and instead of the model state we would return the actual error message, the custom message that we created. So if I build it and go back to the Postman and try to create India again, this time I'm getting just the error message back with the unprocessable entity code. And this is how you could send the messages to the user. However, in my case, I prefer to send the model state for debugging and let the user do the custom error messages on the client side. Basically, we would supply the 422 error for the status code, and the user would decide what message he or she wants to display. So I'll go back and change this back to the model state. And with this, the create country action works. And now let's explore how we can update a country.